with us today. My name is Annabelle, Senior Partnerships Associate at AVPN. On behalf of AVPN, I welcome you to this panel, Impact Standards, Building a Consensus for Sustainable Future. For those who are not familiar, AVPN is a network of founders and resource providers. We have over 600 members across 32 markets. And our mission is to move more capital towards impact in Asia through social investment. Just some small housekeeping rules to start with, as we are looking forward to a very interactive session with our speakers in the next hour. Please don't hesitate to raise your questions in the Q&A tab. Our speakers will be able to address them at the end of the session. We absolutely look forward to hearing from you. For today's session, we are very excited to have 4 speakers. Dr. Bolu Wang, Senior Fellow and Green Project Team Lead from Tsinghua National Institute of Financial Research. Karen Wilson, Senior Advisor at WISE Center OECD. Ben Carpenter, CEO of Social Value International. Mark A, Head of China at AVPN. Mark is also our moderator today. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our moderator. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Hello, everyone. My name is Mark. It's a really honor to moderate the discussion today. Today is about impact standards. Impact standards has been critical topics around impact community. And I've been doing impact investing and advisory for more than 10 years now. And this has been always top questions, how we think about the impact. What is the standards and how do we measure? And today we are so thrilled that we could have leaders in this topic, experts in these topics, to share with us their impact journey. At the same time, what their works around impact standards and going forward, what's going to happen in impact standards. And today, as we having diversified attendees today, so we will cover the topics from the rather, I would say, broader perspectives. I believe these topics has a very complicated context. There are so many perspectives to it. And if we want to discuss really in detail, there's going to be a very long session. But today we will have around, luckily we will have around an hour to dive into this development of impact standards and see how potentially that we can reach so-called global consensus going forward. As Annabelle mentioned, today we are really lucky to have really distinguished speakers. And then we will, today we'll start from Bolu Wang, and then move on to the Karen Wilson, and then Ben Carpenter. So this will be the sequence, and hopefully we will hear more about impact standard development. At the same time, hopefully this will be really answering or resonate with your questions or with your impact journey as well. So now, without further ado, let me over to Bolu. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yes, I will start. First of all, I feel very happy to be invited by Mark and other friends from AVPN to join today's webinar. Today, my topic is heavy lifting and sustainable finance standardization. Although I name it heavy lifting, but I'm aware that we have very diversified audience today, so I will keep my presentation simple and straightforward. What I would like to share today is starting from over 10 years ago, I believe people start to hear about impact investment. And from 5 years ago, people hear more on green finance, and after 2018, hear more about sustainable finance, especially audience from the European region. So today, I would like to share some basic concepts and backgrounds of green finance and sustainable finance. And then I would like to introduce the newly published standard ISO TR 32220. And then update with the audience on important progress on global standard sustainable finance standard harmonization. And the purpose of for AVPN to have today's webinar is, I think, for us to inspire AVPN's regional partners what could be done to be engaged in depth with more with the sustainable finance development area. So I would like to hear my recommendations in the end. So when so now sustainable finance has become a global mandate. How did it happen? So it's launched back in 2016 during China's G20 presidency. The Green Finance Study Group was mandated to identify institutional and market barriers to green finance and options to enhance the mobilization of private capital for green investment. And in 2018, under the Argentina presidency, its remit has expanded to supporting the UN SDGs, and hence renamed the group as Sustainable Finance Study Group. And in 2021, under Italy's presidency, this group has been reopened and co-chaired by China and American. The finance ministers and central bank governors endorsed the re-establishment of this group and upgraded to become a long-lasting working group. It's titled G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. So what's the relationship between sustainable finance, green finance, and maybe, and then you have also questions on social finance and impact investment, etc., etc. So back in the 1987, the Brundtland report has somehow defined the sustainability, which means it meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. This is a very general definition or a very general explanation. But you can see here in this diagram, and under sustainable development, there are environmental goals, social goals, economic goals, and governance. So under environmental, there are climate goals, climate change mitigation, climate change adaptation. There are also other environmental goals, especially important for developing countries, such as pollutant prevention, ecological conservation, and the resource efficiency and circular economy. Therefore, if the finance activities is focused on climate change mitigation, usually it's called low carbon or carbon and low carbon finance and zero carbon finance. And then if you expand, you go to climate change adaptation, and here we could say it's climate finance and supporting both the mitigation and adaptation goals. And then if you expand to other environmental goals, just like what the Chinese government has done, then we call it green finance. And if you cover more of the social goals from the SDGs, and then we call it social environmental or social finance. What's the importance and why it's important to standardize the practice of sustainable finance? So today in this year's G20 and SG Sustainable Finance Working Group meetings, it indicates that the practice of sustainable finance is developing very fast and is being endorsed by an increasing number of regions, countries, and economic entities with different focuses. And so there are not only climate goals, but also other social development goals. So given this dynamic, there is a need to align people's basic understanding in order to facilitate cross-border and cross-sector collaboration and support scaling up the practices. And if you are a European investor, you want to invest in Asia, or you want to invest in American, so how do you know if these activities are identified as green in local context? So this is why we need a global standardization of sustainable finance to reduce cross-border costs. So how do we do this? And here, today I only want to introduce the work of ISO and other important and two other important initiatives. So ISO is a well-known standard organization and has a member of 165 national standard bodies. It promotes development of standardization, and its purpose to facilitate cooperation in the area of intellectual, scientific, and technological economic activity. And it's important because it implements key principles as transparency, openness, and effect, and etc. etc. So since 2019, and ISO established the Technical Committee 322, which focus, the TC is named as Sustainable Finance, and here are links related to the strategic business plan of this technical committee, and also this technical committee works together with other related sustainability and finance focused committee to produce and sustainable finance standards. And I am the convener of the terminology working group starting from 2019. And this in August of this year, we produced the first standard document called ICOTR 32220, which aims to align the basic understanding of sustainable finance. And we work with experts from 26 countries and 11 DSE members. Why it's important to standardize the terminology being used. According to the UBS report, and you see that the investors feel confused if they hear a lot of different concepts. About 72% of wealthy investors surveyed found sustainable investing terms confusing. And also about 50% participants in the AVPN report indicate the lack of agreement around terms and definitions continues to stifle the sustainable investment efforts. So here, so the name of the document is Sustainable Finance Basic Concepts and Key Initiatives, and I provided some document link here as audience reference. And we did a lot of, the experts panel did a lot of extensive review on the existing documents. Here are the example of the sustainable finance terms and definitions we extracted from this document as a demonstration. You can see here that we selected the source from supranational and multinational financial institutions and also national authorities to give people opinion how sustainable finance is defined, and also we include the source of the report. And how about green finance, and here we include the definition from G20 group, and also include definition from People's Bank of China. And here's the user tips and structure of this document. This document have 5 sections, and they are basic concepts, principle, guidelines and regulations, financial products and services, verification, reporting and disclosure, and international initiatives and organizations. The useful information does not only include terms and definitions, but when we design this document, we include further details to explain and why this term is important for sustainable finance markets, and why it's relevant for sustainable finance and financial services. We also include source in case the readers wants to follow the leads and to investigate further. And also it's a handy document which can be tailored to use by different stakeholders like jurisdictions, and financial institutions, and corporate real sector corporations. So if, for example, if you are entry-level financial institutions, you may wonder how to join the Global Sustainable Finance Club. And there, we think that section A, B, and E might be very useful for you. And for regulators, especially for country financial jurisdictions, they might be very interested in knowing how to establish a green financial or sustainable financial system as the European Union or as the Chinese government. Then we think that then the section B, principle, guidelines, and regulation, and C and D will be useful for regulators. And another important progress on the standard harmonization is the IPSF Common Ground Taxonomy. IPSF was launched in October 2019 by European Union, China, Canada, Argentina, Chile, India, Kenya, and Morocco. So until November last year, there are 18 members of the IPSF represent 55% of greenhouse gas emissions, 50% of the world population, and 55% of global GDP. And they have very, very influential observers and join the IPSF to follow the progress. In November this year and during COP26, IPSF published Common Ground Taxonomy. This work is an outcome of the Taxonomy Working Group co-chaired by the UN China. So in July 2020, the UN China initiated the Taxonomy Working Group, and the scope of the work undertake a comprehensive assessment of the existing taxonomy for environmentally sustainable investments, including identifying the commonalities and differences in their respective approaches and outcomes. This Common Ground Taxonomy, I provided a link here. It's an involving tool. It's a technical document for voluntary reference by interest parties, and it could be also a useful tool for other jurisdictions if they consider developing their own sustainable finance or green finance taxonomy. So what could be done by the beginners to enter into the sustainable finance or green finance area? I think my first suggestion is learning by doing, and the second is down to the earth, and think concretely what you are doing right now, how your work could be related to sustainable finance, and reading the document ISO 13220 might be helpful. And you can also seek advices from other speakers today. And last suggestion is critical thinking, and do not try to think based on evidence and use logical thinking to think what could be useful for sustainable development, and talk and discuss, exchange ideas with colleagues or peers or people who have more experience. Thank you. I will give time to other speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boru. Thank you very much for the very informative presentation. At the same time, the insightful suggestion for the beginners, and also go for everyone. Because I think when I'm hearing the really in-depth introduction of these initiatives, what I'm having in mind is that, wow, this is so many things, and I really we need to really follow up closely to see what is going on, and really what this could be relevant to my works, daily works, and or works going forward. Okay, so I will move on to the next speaker. So Karen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark. Let me just share my screen. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. And thank you to AVPN for inviting me. Let me just see if I can get, okay, great. So I just wanted to follow up on what Mark and Bolu were just saying. There's been a lot of activity in this space over the last, particularly the last 2 to 5 years. It's really exciting. There's a lot happening. And the good news is, as you'll hear through the discussions and in the panel, a lot of these efforts are connected. So while it might sound confusing to some of you, especially those of you that are new to the space, the good news is that there is growing coherence and convergence within the landscape of standards. And I want to talk to you about some of the efforts that many of us have been involved here in. I also wanted to thank Bolu for that slide. I love that slide. That talks about sustainable finance and explains the components of it. Some people think sustainable finance is only about green finance, and she very clearly laid out the different elements of green finance, social, which is very important, and that's an area that OECD in particular is doing a lot of work in addition to the other areas, economic and governance. What I wanted to do today is to talk with you about the impact management platform that was launched last November. It's still a new startup in many ways, but it's building upon the work that 15 standard setters have been doing together over the last 3 years. I hope a number of you have heard about the Impact Management Project. It was a time-bound project that started in 2016. They started by working on a set of norms around how do you think about impact management and measurement. And they created the 5 dimensions, and they went on to do a number of other things. In 2018, they realized that, well, we're a time-limited project, and we really need to work with the standard setters if we want to build consensus and really embed standards about impact measurement and management within jurisdictions. So they brought us together, 15 standard setters, 5 international organizations and other private nonprofit standard setters like SVI. We have Ben here on the phone who will on the call who will talk after me. And so we really have been working closely together over the last 3 years as a group, but also in subgroups to progress and build more coherence around the standards, principles, guidelines that each of our organizations have, and most importantly, how those fit together with the other standards and principles and frameworks that others in the network have as well. And actually this work, if I take one example, the group, what we call the group of 5, it used to be the group of 5 of the members that were working on corporate reporting standards, they actually began working very closely together. And last year, 2020, they put out a statement of intent to work more closely together. And since then, a number of them have merged. For example, SASB and IIRC, which is now the Value Reporting Foundation, and now VRF and CDSB are now part of the new International Sustainability Standards Board that was just created by the IFRS Foundation. Another example is the Value Accounting Network that Ben can talk about in more detail, which includes Social Value International, as well as Harvard Business School and some of the other members and additional key players, well, Capitalist Coalition for sure, and other key players in the market. So anyway, so we've been working together the last 3 years, and we realized that, first of all, there's a lot of value in bringing standard setters together to discuss and progress towards more coherence and interoperability. Secondly, we wanted to publish the results of our work of how these different standards fit together. And we discussed what kind of format, and we thought if we write a paper, the paper is outdated as soon as it's printed or shared. And we thought, well, maybe an interactive web tool would be the best way to do that. So I'll talk about that web tool in a minute. But basically, what we agreed is that we want to continue to work together to evolve the system of standards. And so we created in November the Impact Management Platform with the 15 members of the IMP Structured Network, along with 2 new members, UNDESA and Capitalist Coalition. And we want to continue to build clarity, coherence in the system of standards that exist. We also want to continue to evolve the system of standards and update the web tool to help provide ongoing clarity and practical use of the different standards, tools, and frameworks that exist. We also want to work towards more interoperability between these different standards. Potentially there'll be more mergers or collaborations in the future that might come out of that. And finally, we want to identify where there are gaps in the system of standards, and there's still many, and put together a research and development roadmap for how we can collectively or in subgroups work to address some of those gaps. Finally, we also want many of the organizations that are part of the impact management platform also are involved in the G7, the G20, the EU, many of these different policy processes. So we also want to have a more coordinated approach to the kind of dialogue that we're having with policymakers, because they're just as confused as the practitioners about all of these initiatives, all of these frameworks. And so it's really important that there's also coherence for them in terms of what's happening, what kind of tools are out there, how they should think about regulation, well, either voluntary or mandatory disclosures or et cetera. So that's an important part of the work of the platform going forward. As I mentioned, the first, quote, product of the platform is this web tool, which we launched in November. And the web tool is geared towards practitioners to help them in managing their sustainability impacts. So it's an interactive tool, and I'll go through it in a bit more detail. I'm not going to do a demo because there's not time, but we can always do that at a later stage if that's of interest. But if you want on your own computers, you can go to impactmanagementplatform.org. You can open it up and you can look at the wheel. It's under the organization view, and you can click on some of these actions as I'm talking. So the web tool is meant for both organizations that are trying to measure and manage their impact, and also for investors in terms of their investments, whether that's in a single asset or a portfolio of assets. At the launch in November, we launched the system of standards for organizations, and we will be launching this quarter the similar wheel showing where the investment view also fits in. We do already have the investment resources up on the site, but we don't have the full, that part of the website up yet, but that is coming soon. So let me briefly give you an overview of this wheel, which really is the organizing framework for the web tool itself. And so in that, you can see in the center of the wheel, we have this very important action, which is about governance strategy and management. And obviously that's an early step that practitioners, whether companies or investors, need to put in place. The good news is there are a lot of frameworks and principles out there to help guide practitioners. Ben will talk further about some of those that are out there. And but this helps organizations set their sustainability strategy, develop the kind of governance mechanisms they need, and really design their sustainability management process. Then if you go to this next step in the wheel here, it's set and revise objectives. So this is where you can look, as Bolu said, you need to look at the evidence base. You also have to look at your stakeholders and look at the societal and ecological thresholds, and then set your own targets for your organization. Then identifying sustainability topics, you have to identify the ones that are relevant based on your impact goals. And then the next step is to measure sustainability performance, followed by assess impact, estimate the value created, verify the impact. There's a lot of work right now going on assurance, which again, I think Ben can talk about in more detail. And then how do you actually integrate and act? A lot of people think that impact management and measurement is about a number. It's not about a number. It's about getting the kind of information that you need to make better decisions in terms of how you allocate your resources, how you set your priorities. So it's not about the external reporting of how you're doing. It's really about the internal management. And that's why this black part of the wheel, the inner part of the wheel, is really, in many ways, the most important. I know the disclosure part, the whole IFRS foundation, the creation of the International Sustainability Standards Board, that's very important because where you have disclosure regulation, it forces organizations and investors to meet a minimum bar of what they need to report. But many practitioners want to manage their impacts beyond that. They have their own impact goals, and they don't have to disclose everything. They might choose to disclose everything. They'll have to disclose a certain set of measures, but the inner part of the wheel helps them both manage impacts that they need to disclose, but also manage impacts more broadly that they need to make the kind of decisions within their organizations that meet their own impact goals. And finally, the outer ring is benchmarking, where once you have disclosed, you can look at what other organizations, practitioners have disclosed, and there are different tools that you can use to benchmark your performance of the disclosed information with other organizations' disclosed information. So on the website, and sorry, I didn't think to do a little demo here, but you can click on any of these parts of the wheel, including the outer wheel. And what it does is link you to pages that provide an overview of that action. And it also, very importantly, links to the different resources, frameworks, tools, principles that exist, well, not exist, but that are part of the partner's set of tools to help you understand how to manage that step. For example, if you click on the center one, you'll find the UNDP impact standards for managing impact. You'll find the OECD standards for development impact. You'll find the the IFC operating principles for impact investors. You'll find a lot of materials on each of these steps, but particularly that center one. And one of the challenges for the platform, which is the continued collaboration of these standard setters going forward, is not only to update this web tool as new tools come into the market, but also to bring new partners into the collaboration and to work towards more coherence, more interoperability in the landscape of standards to help make it easier for you all practitioners to use the tools that already exist. Because there are no excuses. Some people say, well, impact measurement and management is too hard. And they don't know where to start. Well, there are a lot of tools out there that you can use, and we're hoping that this platform can help make it easy for practitioners to figure out how to get started or how to build upon what they've done already and use the tools that exist, and they can see how they fit together. So we also are committed as a platform of partners to identifying where the gaps are in the system of standards. And I mentioned earlier this research and development roadmap. We're already working on an outline of what might be included in that we'll be discussing with our partners in our meeting next week. So, and I should just end by saying, previously, in the last 3 years, the IMP Structured Network was facilitated by the Impact Management Project team. That has now closed. It was a time-bound initiative, but now the 17 organizations of the platform have agreed to self-manage this collaboration going forward. The steering committee consists of the international organizations that are part of the platform. That includes IFC, UNDP, UN Global Compact, OECD, and UNEPFI. And both OECD and UNEPFI have agreed for the first 2 years to be the co-chairs of the initiative. But we hope that we plan, not hope, that the co-chairs of the platform will evolve over time so that different partners will be co-chairing as the initiative goes forward. So with that, I will wrap up, and I look forward to the continued discussion in the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much. I think we are excited about this project when I'm hearing for the first time. And previously as an advisor and as an investor, I did leverage this. I was amazed by the works that everyone has put it together. And I think I'm also happy that this is going to be a continuous efforts. So right now, then let's move on to the Ben, and let's hear more in details around the more detailed perspective to it. So over to you, Ben. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Karen, Bolu, for those great presentations. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining. It's a real pleasure to be with you today. So I do also have some slides. I'll just share my screen. And I promise you that me and Karen did not prepare together, but there is overlap with what we're going to talk about. So I think that's actually a good thing, right? Okay, so yeah, my name's Ben. I'm Chief Executive of Social Value International. And for those of you that are not familiar with SVI, just a quick slide about us. Our vision is a world where decision making is based on accounts of value. So we believe that accounting and financial accounting is based on a limited view of value. We want to broaden that definition of value to include social and environmental value. So we're really interested in reforming financial accounting itself so that we consider value in its broadest sense, and then we will make decisions that reduce inequality, environmental harm, and actually improve well-being of people. And our mission is to change the way the world accounts for value through developing principles, communities of people, practice, and shifting power. So we're practitioner-led, multi-sector. You'll find our members are in the private sector, the public sector, civil society organizations. We're a real mixture of professionals that come together to develop methodology, standards, training, conferences, and assurance and accreditation as well around these standards. And we've been going since 2007, formerly known as the SRI Network, Social Return on Investment. And we do encourage anyone who's interested in this to join us as a member or partner. And we really enjoy working with people all over the world. We have networks in 26 countries, and yeah, really vibrant community in Asia as well. You know, worked with AVPN for many years, and we've done conferences recently in Taipei and Bangkok. So yeah, hopefully you've heard of us. If not, please do check us out, because we're a community of practitioners always asking, are we doing enough when it comes to impact measurement and management? We believe we need to achieve the SDGs and tackle the inequality and environmental crisis. We need to radically change the way that we're collecting data and using data to make decisions. And I like this cartoon, which really shows us that we need to think big. What got us to here won't get us to where we want to be. And so we need to really push the boundaries in what we do as organizations in terms of understanding the impact we have on people and planet. So onto convergence as the topic of the webinar. Are we seeing convergence? And yeah, some of these slides will be similar to Karen's, because I'm really pleased that Social Value International have been involved in the impact management project for the last 4 or 5 years. It really has been an amazing initiative to bring together the kind of collection of standard setters that exist. All the logos are there. Everyone uses slightly different words, and Bolu's presentation and glossary is fantastic, because we're trying to understand, what does ESG mean? How does that relate to sustainability, human rights, social value? There's so many different words, and it is confusing. But the work of the Impact Management Project has helped, and it is bringing us closer together. I wouldn't say we're completely there yet, but we are seeing sort of a helpful collaboration and recognition that there are different standards doing different things. And I think Karen said that as well. Last year, we had a lot of reaction to the IFRS, which was making its first. The IFRS is the International Financial Reporting Standards. So it's really influencing financial accounting. And this was the first time they were talking about sustainability. And their approach to sustainability was slightly different to the EU's. approach to sustainability in terms of their legislation. So this provokes more, confusion and perhaps kind of questions. But I do think what's helped is that the IMP has helped to kind of group that and respond to these things in a coherent way. And what I've got here is a slide that I use to kind of demonstrate there is a clustering of these standard setters that are now working together. And we're recognizing that where there's commonality, people are working more closely together. So that's a good thing. And in this diagram, I've kind of shown that we've got a recognition between reporting standards, which is that disclosure thing that Karen was talking about, and management standards for organizations to embed impact management in their decision making, which is slightly different to the reporting. So that's an interesting distinction. And then we also have this distinction around materiality and what matters, what means what social or environmental impacts need to be included. And we've got this sort of distinction between standards and organizations focusing on single materiality, which is how social and environmental impacts will affect their financial returns, and how double materiality goes further than that and includes social and environmental impacts for other stakeholders that don't necessarily impact on your financial returns. So that is a kind of gap emerging. But what's really interesting is that because all the standard setters are working together, we're able to show how they're connected and how they can all actually be used simultaneously. So just throwing a few of these logos onto this kind of mapping, you've got GRI, which is a reporting standard, which is very clearly using a double materiality approach. But last year we saw the group of 5 and the organizations that Karen talked about coming together to really kind of group around that single materiality focus, and they even sort of merged to become the Value Reporting Foundation. And then you've got others in the network that are perhaps more to the management standard side, and they're working closely together. So sort of put Social Value International on this map here. We're kind of definitely talking about double materiality in terms of what matters and what needs to be included, and we're more towards the management standards than a reporting standard. And there's others there as well, and UNDP, who've developed the SDG impact standards, which are impact management practice standards, is something that we're very closely aligned to and are going to be working more closely with. So as Karen said, we're seeing this grouping of organizations that have commonalities and working more closely together, and also illustrating how they fit together. It's not saying that one is wrong or one is right, but they are useful for different purposes. Here you go. You've just seen it. I promised me and Karen didn't collude on this, but I wanted to talk about the future of the impact management project, which is now called Platform, Impact Management Platform, which Karen just explained. Really is a fantastic resource that you should all check out. The resources and standards that it can be found across that wheel are an excellent starting point for anyone interested in this space. And just briefly then, just again to reinforce, I suppose, what Karen was saying, more convergence and collaboration will be happening over the next few years, I'm sure. And I wanted to talk about valuation, because valuing is one of the core parts of SVI's work, has been from the beginning. Valuing social and environmental impacts is necessary, we believe, to understand what matters most to people, and therefore make decisions that can optimize value for people. So we're part of that group now, called themselves the Value Accounting Network, which is to bring together all the other initiatives that are working on valuation. You may have heard of some of them. The Harvard Business School's Impact Weighted Accounts Initiative is a popular one. The Capitals Coalition are convening this network. Obviously, they're well known as well. And the Value Balance Alliance is another particularly well known one. So coming together we released a statement last year to collaborate and again bring more convergence and understanding to this busy and innovative kind of space. The other thing on valuation, which I just wanted to flag up, was that in December, the Impact Task Force report for the G7 spoke actually about looking at valuation, which was the first time that recommendation has been made at that level. So I do think this is a space to watch, and valuation is going to become even more important in the future. Stakeholder engagement, another key aspect of SVI's approach, is always popular and a topic that never goes away. You need good stakeholder engagement if you're going to do good impact measurement management. Stakeholder engagement means speaking to people, the people that are experiencing the impact, and doing that well is, the most important thing when it comes to impact measurement management. If you aren't speaking to people and giving a voice to those that experience impact, then you're never going to really measure and manage the impact that matters. And so SVI have been working on this from the beginning. It's a core part of our approach, but it's also found prominently in the SDG impact standards, and the OECD have got amazing resources on this. The guide there that I put up, due diligence guidance for meaningful stakeholder engagement, is a particular favorite of mine that I'm kind of always showing to people. And SVI were also part of an OECD project last year promoting the social and solidarity economy, which looked at stakeholder engagement. And so there's a few resources coming out of that, and I'm sure more to come from the OECD on putting stakeholders in the center, best practice for engagement. So the last one before I stop is about assurance. As Karen knows me well, a big an important part of impact measurement management, I think, is getting that external verification and assurance of whether it's a report or your management practice is so important to tackle greenwashing, impact washing, whatever you want to call it. It adds credibility to what you're doing, and at the moment, without that, I feel like there's a lot of sort of impact measurement that isn't really doing of good quality. So what we do need to see is more assurance, and the SDG impact standards are bringing out an assurance model this year. SVI have got report assurance, but also social value management certificates, which gives you that credibility to the social value management that you're doing, and standards. So this comes, links to what Bolu was talking about. When the international standards organizations start getting involved in this, then that's a fantastic sign. They are the biggest standard setter out there. You can get conformity to the ISO standards. Doing a bit of work with them at the moment to look at their standards that relate to ESG, and this is a great sign, and I anticipate more assurance and conformity and verification to standards in the future. And do keep your eyes on Bolu's work, Technical Committee 322 on sustainable finance. That's a highly relevant one. So that is the end of my presentation, and I hope that was useful and not too duplicative of Karen's.
No, thank you so much, Ben. That's wonderful, and I think the audience can now understand the enormous efforts and the resources being put into work for years already. So I think it's pity that we don't have too much time left for today, but I think I've been hearing a lot of like questions around a lot of things. So I think I will just pick one that I'm myself also interested in. So today we're talking about the impact standards. So what is the ideal status? What is the consensus that we are looking for, and what is how much time do we need it to get there? So those things that I think to hear briefly from all of you. At the same time, as a closing message, I also like you to share with us your suggestions on how our attendee today can take next steps to be involved in this impact standards initiatives. From for sure, they are from diversified perspectives and different positions, but how they can really get involved, or if they haven't started yet. So maybe you'll start from Bolu. So on the what's the ideal consensus that we can expect, and what kind of a suggestion you could share with the audience today. Thank you, Bolu.
You can see that my topic here, I name it as heavy lifting. I'm not sure what idea Ben or Karen has on reaching global consensus. I think, are you optimistic? So, and how many time do you think it would take? But I think it's a good sign, a good signal sending out by the international community that jurisdictions has been receiving mandates on implementing the sustainable finance and green finance on impact investment. And so I think and you can see for European Union and for China, why the scaling up of sustainable finance or green finance is so quickly is because jurisdictions endorsed the standardized practices. I think if we want to expedite or accelerate the global harmonization or consensus, we need to find a better way to engage with the jurisdictions. This is also the question or a request sending to ISSB by the G20 members this year. And also why ISSB adjusts its governance structure. But I would like to hear more from Karen and Ben. Thank you.
So maybe Karen, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just build on what Bolu said. I mean, and also what Ben was saying earlier, we're seeing unprecedented speed in standard setting around sustainable finance. And usually speed and standard setting can't be used in the same sentence. So it's really remarkable, the developments that have been happening and this global coordination where the pieces are actually maybe not all directly, but indirectly connected. And that really is making a big difference. At the same time, we have to let the processes take their time. A lot of this, as both Ben and I were discussing, is the trust building, the collaboration between these different standard setting organizations that used to never do that. It used to be my standard, your standard, and never the two shall meet. And now actually people are really productively trying to work together to the point of even mergers between some of these things. So we need to let that trust building, these processes continue through broader collaborations, smaller group collaborations, and it's important that other stakeholders and practitioners are also involved in these processes. So I do hope that people can provide, listening today, can provide feedbacks. You can do that directly through the impact management platform, but also through AVPN. Also, we're hoping with the platform going forward, we will be creating different working groups, and we hope to bring in practitioners into some of that work, particularly around the research and development agenda going forward. So I'm very optimistic, but we do need to go step by step. There's been a lot of progress, and I would just urge more progress around the S. There's been a lot of progress on E, particularly on climate, and that's great. We need more progress on the other E, like biodiversity and other factors, but we also need to progress on the S. Again, no excuses. We have measures, we have approaches. Let's start with those and build upon those. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for your message. So over to you, Ben. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah. Urgency, I think that was one of the things you said, and I think that's a really important thing for us all to bear in mind. We're rapidly approaching 2030. You know, we'll be here before we know it, and we're a long way off achieving the SDGs and where we want to be. You know, inequality and environmental crisis, we can't ignore them anymore. You know, it's getting worse, despite all of the increase in ESG and investment, sustainable investment. It doesn't appear to be making that a bigger difference. So I do feel like, not to be doom and gloom, but we do need to radically change the way we're making decisions, and I believe it will happen. So I am optimistic because of the collaboration that Karen spoke about, and recognition that we have to. I think that is positive. You said, what are my top tips or advice for people? I was just thinking, well, two really. The first one is to have conversations within your organization at the highest level possible, to get support from the leadership and the governance of any organization, whether you're an investment organization or just a company or an organization delivering services. This needs to be a priority at the top. So the leadership need to recognize that each organization has a strategy for being sustainable or maximizing impact, whatever you want to call it. It needs to be there and enshrined at the top. So when board meetings happen, we're not just talking about financial performance anymore. We're talking about social and environmental impact. And if it exists at the top of an organization in the strategy and the governance, then it will be part of the culture of an organization to think about social and environmental impact, and different data will be collected to improve performance. So getting buy-in and support from the top of the organization is probably my first thing, and that won't be easy. Many times it will be a difficult conversation with the top of the organization, but it needs to happen for it to stick. And the last one is just get started. If you are sort of overwhelmed, yes, there is a lot to kind of consider, but you won't get it perfect straight away if you've not begun. You just need to get something going and build on it year after year. And as Karen says, no excuses. There's lots of resources out there, and there's lots of communities and networks to join with your peers and others to work this through together.
Thank you, Martin, for that, Ben. I think in AVPN, we talk a lot about, or we drive a lot of collaboration, we drive a lot of learning, and drive a lot of actions. So I think the key word today is no excuse from Karen. So let's just get to it. And then I think it's what I'm hearing the most is that really identify the key stakeholders and start engaging. And if you don't have enough information, that's an excuse, because there's so many things out there. If you need more, contact us. We have so much things to share, so much insight for share, for you to start or enhance or accelerate your impact journey. And impact standard is just so critical on the impact agenda, because at the end of the day, we need to measure, we need to understand what if we are doing well, and we need to communicate. We need to ensure that everything is going well. So this is going to be very important. So today, I think, as I said, time is very limited. As I expected, it's never enough. There are so many topics that we can deep dive, expand it to the monthly or annual meeting. But just like today, I'm just so happy to initiate this conversation with you all. And I believe the participant today and the community would like to hear more from you in, I think, different topics around impact standards. So thank you very much, Balu, and thank you very much, Karen and Ben, today for your insightful sharing. And looking forward to having more in-depth conversation going forward with the more diversified attendees and the speakers next time. So thank you again all for today. And thank you all for your participation in this session today from everywhere in the world. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Bye.